Hi everybody, thank you for joining me and Happy New Year for 2020. Hope it's going to be a good year for everybody. I wanted to talk first of all this year about the sad passing of Neil Innes over Christmas. Musical legend, a legend in his own lunchtime. It was very sad news that we got just after Christmas, and I just wanted to share with you some of the things that I've got relating to Neil and some stories from a couple of times when I've met him in the past, and I've got some stories that you may or may not have heard before. So, yeah, really sad news and unexpected as well. I believe he hadn't been ill. It was just something that happened pretty quickly. The first time I ever met Neil was at this gig here. I went to see the Rutles back in 2004 in Leeds, and I mean, I'd never expected to go and see the Rutles. It was a real sort of bonus for me. Can you pick that up there? This is signed on the back. My ticket's signed to Andrew. Love Neil Innes, and above there you can see Barry Wom's signature, John Halsey, the drummer. So that was nice. And what happened on this day, I'm going to tell you some stories about that in a few minutes. We'll come back to that in a moment. But yeah, I mean, Neil Innes, where do you start? Well, you start with the Bonzo Dog Doodah Band as far as I'm concerned. If you've not heard the album Gorilla, I would absolutely recommend it. This album never fails to cheer me up if I'm listening to it. It's just such fun. And I was thinking about this, like, why did I not consider this for my top 10 albums of the 60s that I did a few weeks ago? I would say that's remiss of me. But some absolutely fantastic songs on there. I mean, obviously, it wasn't just Neil. Viv Stanshall was a major part of what made this album brilliant. But if you've never heard that, it is just such fun all the way through. That's Gorilla. That was their first album. And I got this set a couple of years ago, which has got all their albums on it. That's well worth checking out. I think it's 5 albums altogether. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 albums plus extra treats, so that's well worth looking out for. Bonzo Dog Doodah Band, what a great band they were. But anyway, the Rutles, which is my sort of big love for Neil. So I got this back in 1990, 91-ish, and it's the full version that's got Get Up and Go on it, which Paul McCartney famously really didn't like because that was a bit too close to Comfort for Get Back, without a doubt. But inside there I keep another ticket. This wasn't a Rutles gig. This was just Neil on his own. Again in Leeds, about a year or two after that first Rutles gig, and that was a wonderful gig. It was just him and a keyboard, him and an acoustic guitar, and you just really got his personality shining through and his wonderful songs. So that was great. This copy of the Rutles album actually is also signed by Neil. I'd forgotten about that until I opened it up today. Again, to Andrew, love from Neil Innes. Thank you, Neil. Rutles Archaeology was a great album which came off the back of the Beatles anthology and ties in very nicely to one of the stories that I'm going to tell you in a minute about Neil. I've got another version of Archaeology here which has also got some bonus tracks on the end. Nice photo there of Neil, Ricky Fattar and John Halsey, otherwise known as Ron, Stig and Barry. And Rutles live album as well, which I think this was the last time I went to see the Rutles, probably about maybe 3 or 4 years ago, maybe a bit longer. But that's got quite a lot of Rutles classics on there. Anyway, so yeah, I was going to tell you about these stories from when I spoke to Neil back at this gig in 2004. So it was the first time I'd seen the Rutles, first time I'd seen Neil, and after the gig, he was just out and about. He was helping pack up the band basically afterwards, and I went over and started having a chat to him. And any person in their right mind in that situation would have said, "Oh, I'm sorry now, I'm busy tidying up, busy packing up, got to get on to the next venue." But not Neil. He gave me far more of his time than I had any right to expect, and I'll always thank him for that. And I had all this written out. I did like a mini interview with him, or a Q&A. It was completely unplanned, but I just fired a load of questions at him and he was happy to answer everything. And I had it all written down and I really can't find it. And I know it's on the internet somewhere and Google can't find it either, so I'm going to go from memory here. But I asked him a few questions. I asked him some questions about Magical Mystery Tour, because obviously he was there with Bonzo Dog Doodah Band and they did Death Cab for Cutie in that great scene in the strip club. And I just asked him really if he'd had any other involvement in Magical Mystery Tour, and he said no, not really. They just went there, they just did that scene and that was it for them. He wasn't on the bus or anything like that. And I asked him about... now, I'd appreciate your help here, because a Google search for me is not finding anything at all. But if any of you know anything about this, there was a song came out, and it was a parody of Free as a Bird. So it must have come out after 1995. And the lyrics went, and it was really sort of slagging off the song really, but the lyrics went something like, please don't put out this dirge. And I used to have an MP3 of it and not got it anymore. I can't find any reference to it on the internet. And I asked Neil about this. I said, was that you? Because I wasn't sure if it was maybe him or it was maybe Weird Al Yankovic or somebody like that. So I said to Neil, there was this song, was that you? And absolutely not, he said. He said he would never do anything like that. And I think what he meant by that was that the Rutles was always really respectful of the Beatles. And I know it's a Mickey take and it's a parody, but it was always coming from a place of love. And Neil wouldn't have done something that actually sort of openly mocked them like that. So I still don't know who it is who did that song. So if anybody remembers that, I would love you to let me know. That would be great. And I asked him about the kind of fans that used to come to Rutles gigs. And I always remember he said something along the lines of, our fans tend to have their own mind. They're not swayed too much by the media. And I think that just sort of generally means, I don't know, does that mean we're a bunch of oddballs? I don't know. But he was very respectful of his fans, that they didn't just sort of follow what the media says, or the newspapers say that you should follow what's the sort of current thing. He was always very respectful that fans sort of loved what he'd done for what it was, and not because it was following any fashion or trend. So he was very grateful for that. But the other big thing that I asked him, getting to the main point of the story and how this links to archaeology, is I was asking him about the archaeology project and how it had come about. And he said to me, and I'd never heard this story anywhere else, that when it got to the sort of mid-90s, he said he'd been thinking for a while about making more Rutles records. But ever since John had died in 1980, he didn't feel like it was the right thing to do. He'd always backed away from doing it and didn't want to get involved. And when he was aware that the Beatles were doing the anthology project, he decided it was time to think about it again. So being good friends with George Harrison, it gets me thinking about this story. He phoned George. He said he told me that he phoned George up, and he said, "George, I'm thinking of doing more Rutles songs, but he says I'm worried about the fact that John's no longer with us, and I don't know whether it's the right thing to do." And George said, "No, go for it." He said, "Brilliant, do it." So Neil replied to him, "Right, well, if you're okay with it, I'm going to do it. I'm going to write more Rutles songs." And George Harrison replied to Neil, "You realise that one of you is going to get shot now, don't you?" And I got a bit taken aback by that. I mean, that just shows... It shows the humour of George, that even though that was a situation that must have been awful for him to have lived through, for him and John being so close beforehand, that he could still joke about it like that. And Neil told me that story, and I loved hearing it. I was taken aback by it. But I've never heard him say the story anywhere else. So I don't know whether that's sort of out there as a common story. So I thought I would share that with you anyway. So yeah, I'd spent a few minutes with Neil, and I said to him, "Look, Neil, you've got far better things to be doing than talk to me. I'm going to stop asking you questions, and I'm going to go now and let him pack up and get off." So that was the first time I met him, and I met him another time when I got the other signature, and it was just a lovely all round guy. Really sad to see him go. The fact that we won't get to see the Rutles again or any of his music. We're just going to have to cherish those YouTube clips in the albums that we've got. So rest in peace, Neil Innes, Ron Nasty. You were a legend in your own lunchtime, and we miss you all. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you again soon. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.